Cops of Reddit, what has so far been the creepiest call you've ever had to respond to, and what happened? Got a call for a missing child, got to the home to find the mother highly distressed, and not sure what to do. I called in everyone to first search the home and property. I decided to search the backyard since it was a large, wooded lot with no visible fence. After about 10 minutes, I found the boy. He was caught on an old chain-link fence in the woods that was blocked by a bunch of trees, so you couldn't see it from the house. He had basically gotten strangled to death on the fence. He must have been climbing on it, fell, and got his hooded sweatshirt caught on it. The worst part for me was having to call it in on the radio, knowing the mother might hear it inside from one of the other officers' radios. Working the third shift on Halloween night, I'm out by one of our smaller lakes just outside the city limits. Kids love to go out and drink, which is surrounded by some very nice houses. Going through the neighborhood, each road ends at a small 2-lane road surrounding the lake. I'm slowing to the stop sign and already starting to look to my right to make the turn when my headlights start tracing the rock wall that surrounds the lake. I catch something out of the corner of my eye in one of the large trees that dots the walking path. I backed up to see what it was, and I saw a guy hanging. At first, I thought it was a Halloween decoration. The neighborhood is really into decorating for every holiday. So, I stopped, got out, and as soon as my flashlight hits him, I realized, nope, no decoration, he was dead. As I'm standing there getting ready to call it in, I notice a gaggle of kids coming down the street trick-or-treating. As soon as they see my car, they start heading my way faster. So, I took it back up the block to meet the parent walking with them and tell her she needed to take the long way around the block the other way. She could see it on my face. I'm not kidding. Turns out he was a 20-year-old that was devastated about his girlfriend breaking up with him, and she lived in the last house on that block where she would see him the following day when she looked out her window. We responded to a burglary alarm at a mortuary and found that one of the rear doors was left open. The policy now dictates that the entire building needs to be cleared, searched, to confirm that it was a false alarm, which most are. It's the middle of the night and totally dark. We use flashlights and never turn on lights. We walk into one of the rooms and see a body on a table. It smelled like a mildly decomposing body. It appeared that it was waiting to be processed, possibly embalmed, by the mortician. Suddenly, I see a shadow to my right, and I shine my light there and find nothing out of the ordinary. I immediately smell a really strong whiff of perfume blow by me. The search was completed more expeditiously than usual after that. Nothing was found. It was a stormy night on the Oregon coast. A lady was driving drunk and ran into the back of a parked school bus. When she did, her car caught on fire, but she was able to escape. When I found her slowly walking down a side street, I told her to stop and turn around. When she turned around, her lower jaw was gone, and she was totally dazed. Her tongue was sticking straight out the top of her neck, and she was trying to talk. She ended up surviving but needed tons of plastic surgery. I responded to a report of an unresponsive infant. When I arrived, all the family members were standing around casually in the front yard, pointing into the house. I found the baby in the back room laying on her back on a bare mattress. I started CPR but realized the baby was probably already deceased. We rushed her out to the arriving ambulance, hoping they had a way to bring her back. I learned she was the mother's second suspicious SIDS death, and I had her other children removed from her care. The tricky part was when I left the scene and went to the ER to see what came of the situation. As I walked in and asked where she was, an ER nurse walked over to me and handed me the deceased baby swaddled in a blanket and told me to wait for someone to show me to the morgue. So, I'm standing there in the ER in uniform, holding what everyone thinks is a live infant, but rather, an infant corpse. Several people stopped by to see her and comment on how cute it is to see an officer holding a baby. I just smiled, but it killed me inside. After what felt like an eternity, I was ushered back to the morgue and told I had to wait with the baby until the medical examiner arrived. They took the blankets off and laid her on a stainless steel gurney and left me alone with her again. I lounged around the morgue for about an hour, waiting. By the time I got home several hours after the end of my shift, because this call came out 15 minutes before the end of my 10-hour shift, I laid down on my bed and cried for a long time. My young daughter was in daycare, and my wife was at work. I really needed to hold both of them, so the house felt incredibly empty. My daughter was only slightly older than the infant, and when I looked at her earlier, I kept seeing my own daughter. I didn't get any sleep before going back in for the next shift later that night. Got a call that someone wasn't answering their phone or the doorbell. We got to the house and noticed that every window was blinded by either curtains or pieces of paper. We rang the doorbell and yelled through the letterbox, but there was no answer. We opened the door and got inside. In the house, it looked like someone just had lunch. There was bread on the table and juice or milk in the glasses. Children's toys were scattered all around. Then I saw a note that gave me the chills. It was a suicide note. As the door was locked from the inside, the person had to be in the house. We checked room by room, and my heartbeat was at 300% when I checked the bathroom. Preparing myself for slit wrists or throats, I opened the door slowly, but there was nothing. Finally, one more room left, which was the attic. We walked slowly up the stairs, and we found the resident there, hanging from a beam. I will never forget the adrenaline I had, the scene in the living room, or the resident I found. My cousin is a cop, and he responded to a call on Valentine's Day night. A 12-year-old girl called in to say her mother had blown her brains out in the living room. I guessed she and her brother were getting ready for dinner, and the mom just shot herself. He said the creepy thing about it was dinner all set up, drinks on the table, and suddenly she shot herself. Kids were sitting outside when he arrived. To this day, I can't imagine Valentine's Day for them. But I know that is something that stuck with him seeing that. Not a cop, but a correctional officer in Texas. One time a guy slit the forearm side of his elbows, where it bends. He laid there in a big puddle of his own blood. I was one of the responders that day. I'll never forget it. As soon as you entered the cell, the smell just hit you. Blood has a strong metallic smell, which I never realized before. He'd been laying there a while, so the blood had clotted, which, again, I did not expect. As we lifted the barely conscious guy out of the blood fell off his body in chunks, like jello. It was pretty disturbing because I didn't expect any of it, nor was I able to mentally prepare for it. We're not really medically trained, so all of it was completely surprising to me. Not a cop myself, but my dad is, and I asked him this one time. He told me it was when he went to this one house because a woman had called and said that men were breaking into the house. He gets there, and he said it was immediately obvious that the woman was not exactly all together mentally. He said she kept mumbling things and was very jumpy and skittish, not to mention that every single wall of her house apparently had at least 6 or 7 crosses on it, if not more. He calms her down, checks around the house for any signs of entry or just anything weird, and there's absolutely nothing that would indicate that anyone had been trying to or had been successful in breaking in. He said she followed him around the entire time and would point to things, like a doorknob or window latches, and say, "Oh, that's not where I left it." That's how they got in. He said the whole thing was fairly eerie, considering he was at this woman's house in the middle of the night, surrounded by crosses and listening to her mumble on about random shit. To make her feel better, he did a sweep of the whole house to see if there was anyone else inside, which there wasn't. He said the one thing that made it creepy for him was the fact that every few minutes, she'd say something like, "Oh, they're here again," or "He's right behind us, I can feel it." Ex-cop. I worked in a high-tech task force agency conducting computer forensics investigations. Lots of child porn. Lots. Anyways, we were doing a multi-agency search warrant sweep in a large metro area in California. We serve a search warrant for distributing/possessing CP at a residence in a semi-decent area, and the suspect fit the prototypical Hollywood child molester look. He lived with his disabled wife, no kids, and she had mobility issues, mostly stayed downstairs and had not been upstairs for years. We go upstairs, and this guy has a legitimate masturbation station set up in one of the bedrooms that had an outside padlock on it. It was dark, the windows were covered, and he had baby dolls with their assholes cut out all over the room and some of their mouths cut out for impromptu baby sex dolls. Some of the heads were removed and scattered on the floor. This guy had serious issues. Got called to assist an ambulance at an address because they were struggling with a woman who'd had an apparent seizure. We got there, and she's this tiny skinny little Singaporean lady who's being held down on the floor by a paramedic. She's hissing and struggling against her and repeatedly trying to bite the paramedic. Her eyes are all black and red, no white. It takes me, 200 pounds, my partner, for the evening, tilde 180 pounds, plus 3 paramedics to hold her down. All the time, she's struggling and trying to bite with veins popping out of her neck. She's looking past us at the corner of the room, screaming at something that isn't there, telling it not to kill her and us. Her husband, who seems weirdly unfazed by the whole thing, tells us this has been happening since she last went to Singapore and got sick after visiting a holy site. Usually, her sister has to stop it by putting this powder on her forehead in a cross. Still, unfortunately, she's out of the country. In the end, she was taken to the hospital for a mental health assessment by the paramedics. I often wonder what the outcome was but have no way of finding out, unfortunately. My cousin is on in a major city, Apparently 911 got a call from a 6-year-old claiming vehemently that there was a zombie outside of his house on the street. So, a patrol car swings around to see what's up. Turns out a tweaker on meth gouged out his own eyes, had blood dripping down from the empty sockets, and was stumbling around blindly with his hands stretched out in front of him. Goddamn, turns out the kid was telling the truth.